Okay, so let's have a look at how we can access items in a list, specific items in a list. As the name suggests, and as I have already mentioned, a list has an order in it. So similarly, like when you have a list of guests or something, the list has an order. You have a first item on the list, second item, so on and so on. So it's the same in Python. Basically, we can access a specific element of a list using a notation like this. So basically, when first we create a list here, it has one, this is entire second, third and fourth element, so we have 4 elements, and then when we want to access a specific element, we use the name of the list, the name we have defined, we have used when creating the list, and then we use square brackets, and inside we input an integer which tells us which element we want to have access to. What might surprise you when we are counting these things, even when I was doing this, I said first element, second, third, and fourth one. So this for us was the third element. Here I used a number 2 and I got the third element. So kind of a weird behavior in Python. Well, with time, when you use Python, you see that there is actually a reason behind it, and it's actually useful to have it like this. But for now, it might be counterintuitive for you. This element is, you might say, 0th element, so kind of like a 0th floor in a building. So we have a 0th element, first element, second, and third one. So yeah, when you want to access elements of a list, you have to remember that the values you use to access the elements start with 0. These values here, which you use here, these are called indices. So this another way of saying that we start with from 0 is that we start with an index 0. So this element has an index 0. This element has an index 1. Chihuahua has an index 2, and Husky has an index 3. So this you have to keep in mind. This thing you have to keep in mind when dealing with lists. So basically, the thing you have to keep in mind is that we use indices to access elements of lists. There are some few cool features concerning indices, basically, and also a few things you have to be careful when dealing with lists. So for instance, my list has 4 elements. First one has so if I try to access element with index which is like there is no element connected to this index, then I will get an error, list index out of range. So be careful, especially be careful. We have 4 elements, so it's often the case that you want to access the last element. So you have 4 elements, so you could use 4. This is also index out of range, because remember, if you have 4 elements, the last index is 4. So this thing, you have to be careful about this thing. One cool feature of Python is that you can also count from the end of the list. So you can use negative indices. So for instance, -1 is the last element, -2 is the second last, and so on and so on. You, when dealing with negative indices, it becomes more natural because the first one from the end is also you are also using index -1. So it kind of becomes more natural. Of course, still you have to be careful about indices out of range. One final thing which I should explain to you, it's also explained below here in this notebook. Sometimes, as we have seen already, you can have a list which is an element of another list. These are called nested lists. And how do you access elements of such a list? Well, it's quite natural when you start thinking about it. This thing, when I accessed this element, is a list. So how do I access an element of a list? Well, I use brackets, square brackets, and then I point Python to the element I want to access. So let's say I want to access 0, first, second element, chocolate Labrador. So if I do it like this, I get the second element of the list, which is the first element of another bigger list. So yeah, this is how you access elements of a list. In the next video, we will discuss how you can actually get bigger parts of a list. So these are called slices. If you want to slice a list from some part to some other part, there is an option like this in Python. You can do it, and we will learn how to do this. So thank you, and see you in the next video.